There are so many movies that fall apart when it comes to the villain reveal, either serving up a painfully predictable baddie or a rubbish special effect. As such, it's little surprise that some filmmakers simply opt never to show the antagonist on screen at all, relying on clever gimmickry to conceal the malevolent presence from audiences, and maybe the movie's characters too. Typically, this narrative device skews to the horror genre more often than not, with budgetary limitations forcing directors to get creative, while occasionally it's a purely story-driven decision to subvert expectations and give viewers something fresh. These 10 movies all did unique and memorable things with unseen and invisible enemies for our heroes, whether supernatural forces or the simple off-screen unknown. Had the filmmakers decided to give us front and center glimpses of the antagonists, these films wouldn't have been nearly as effective or iconic as they turned out. Instead, the results were distinct in ways most of their genre brothers were not. Oh, and don't worry, The Happening did not make this list. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are the 10 best movies with an unseen enemy. Number 10, Final Destination. When it comes to invisible antagonists in horror movies, Final Destination found a way to do something creative and different. Far away from the usual ghosts, poltergeists, and demons, the villain of the franchise is none other than death itself, who attempts to murder those poor young meat sacks who manage to avert his carefully laid plans. Typically, each movie begins with a grisly catastrophe which the central characters avoid by way of a fortuitous premonition, and Death spends the rest of the film working back through the intended victims in the order they were supposed to die. We never see Death, who instead subtly manipulates the environment of his victims Rube Goldberg style to ensure they suffer a nauseating and hilariously convoluted demise. The rules regarding Death's function and the character's ability to avoid dying are changed throughout the series. It's widely accepted though that the late great Tony Todd's mortician William Bloodworth is the closest the franchise gets to giving Death a physical manifestation, what with his suspiciously intricate knowledge of Death's plans and all. Nevertheless, the films thrive on that mischievous unseen hand pulling the strings and setting these dopey teens up for their gnarly dirt naps. And even the lesser entries into the franchise have plenty of self-aware fun with the deliciously dark concept. You know what, we mentioned Tony Todd there, and I want to know right now, what is your favourite performance from the late great legend? Let me know in the comments section down below. Number 9, Duel. Steven Spielberg's 1971 directorial debut, Duel, is an exercise in minimalist filmmaking brilliance. A ruthlessly efficient thriller in which motorist David Mann is doggedly pursued through dusty rural California by a rusted-out tank truck, the driver of which is never clearly seen. Spielberg's film has only scant dialogue and focuses almost entirely on the suspenseful thrill of the chase. A superbly streamlined effort that ditches fancies like character development in favor of a tight 89-minute vehicular cat-and-mouse game. The script, by legendary author Richard Matheson, who adapted his own short story, explicitly stated that the driver would never be seen, and beyond a handful of distant shots of the driver's body confirming him to be an actual human being, we got no discernible glimpse of his face. Spielberg stated in interviews that the intent was to evoke a fear of the unknown in the viewer, and by focusing on the truck rather than the man driving it or his motives, it makes the truck the real villain of the film. Stuntman Kerry Lofton drove the thing, in case you were wondering, while countless versions of this story would doubtless give the driver a lengthy, guff-filled backstory and try to engage him as a person. Spielberg jettisons all that for the sake of a white-knuckle thrill ride that kick-started his unprecedented run of all-timer suspense pictures. Number 8, Dunkirk. Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk is a singular war epic for many reasons, not least that it depicts World War II's Dunkirk evacuation from the sole perspective of Allied soldiers, showing not a single German soldier in any detail whatsoever. This was part of Nolan's attempt to convey the fear and anxiety felt by the soldiers at land, sea, and air, boxed in while waiting for rescue from an extremely potent enemy force. Literally dozens of war movies have humanized both sides of World War II, but in an attempt to deliver the maximum suspense possible, Nolan trained his focus on one side side working against the ticking clock to end all ticking clocks. Having no scenes where we meet German commanders or get a feel for their tactics makes their assaults that much more unpredictable and visceral, allowing the audience to experience just a sliver of the terror felt by the trapped soldiers. Bravo, Sir Nolan, bravo. Number 7. Paranormal Activity. Though the Paranormal Activity franchise eventually flamed out amid relentless annualized releases and a patent lack of imagination, the original 2009 movie remains a fantastically unnerving example of how to engineer tightly wound tension with limited resources. The film's big success is that despite focusing on a couple who find themselves terrorized by a demonic entity in their home, it never once shows the audience what the creature looks like. The devilishly simple execution sees director Oren Peli exploiting the invisible fears that keep us all up at night. Creaking hallways, doors gently moving on their own, an ambient noise that sounds a hell of a lot like footsteps. We've all been there. The closest we ever get to seeing the demon is a series of powdered footprints it makes in their bedroom, with the film otherwise using subtle and virtually costless tricks to manipulate the environment. The result was strong critical acclaim and a stonking $193.4 million box office haul against a mere $15,000 budget. That is impressive. Sadly though, the 6th film in the series, Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension, decided to dispense with the little remaining mystery and reveal what the demon looked like. It was not good. Number 6. Bambi. Anyone who still has a semblance of a heart in these cold, uncaring times cannot think about Disney's Bambi without getting all misty-eyed. An alternately charming and heart-wrenching film best remembered for the sequence where little Bambi's beloved mother is mercilessly gunned down by a hunter. I'm still not over it. And while it's easy to forget because, let's be honest, the human brain can only stomach this horror once a decade, the man responsible for killing Bambi's mum is never actually seen on screen. His actions are certainly felt, obviously, and the animals make continual references to his presence throughout the film. But he's never physically seen, nor does he speak, have a name, or really do anything you'd typically expect from a Disney villain. Hell, he doesn't even die in the end. Boo. Originally, Disney planned to show the man to the audience, but decided against it, as well as a deleted scene where Bambi and his dad discover the man's corpse in the aftermath of the forest fire. Impressively, despite his minimal presence, the hunter made the AFI's list of 50 greatest movie villains back in 2003, being the only character on the list who the audience never sees. If you're enjoying this unseen enemy list today, my friend, then hit that subscribe button down below and you will see plenty more of these videos, I promise. Number 5. Black Christmas 1974. Black Christmas is one of the earliest entries into the slasher genre, an extremely influential film without which John Carpenter's Halloween likely would not exist. And while the genre is usually defined by a killer, whether masked or not, with a memorable look, name, and identity, Black Christmas never gives audiences a clear look at the antagonist beyond his shadowy figure. His name is implied to be Billy, and we hear him make a number of obscene phone calls to the poor sorority girls he's stalking, but his face is obscured throughout the film, and nothing approaching a concrete motive for his murderous antics is ever given. Director Larry Clark suggested the idea of an anonymous killer himself, though screenwriter A. Roy Moore took some convincing before agreeing to it. The result is an uncommonly chilling entry into a genre that didn't take long to become tired, even if the lack of a merchandisable protagonist arguably harmed the film's franchise potential. As a one-off though, it is creepy as hell and a surefire holiday classic. Number 4. The Terminator. In fairness, all of the Terminator movies feature explicit robotic antagonists chasing down our flesh and blood heroes. But it is important not to ignore the fact that the series' real antagonist is actually operating invisibly from behind the curtain. The T-800 may play the corporeal baddie of the original Terminator, but it's quickly established that the murderous cyborg was sent back in time by Skynet. Skynet is of course the self-aware AI construct which is plotting to kill Sarah Connor, preventing an uprising against the machines and ensuring humankind is swiftly annihilated with a few handy nukes. There's always been an abject, fascinating creepiness to Skynet. This formless intelligence which has learned at a geometric rate far beyond human expectation or control. Sadly though, some of the Terminator sequels made the misguided decision to give Skynet personified humanoid forms. Dr. Serena Kogan in Terminator Salvation, and the T-5000 Terminator in Terminator Genesis. violence. You know what, let's just forget about all of the Terminator films that came out after Judgment Day, eh? Unless you like Rise of the Machines as well, then you do you. Number 3, It Comes at Night. 2017's art house horror film It Comes at Night proved majorly divisive with audiences, scoring a brutal D cinema score precisely because of the nature of its unseen danger. The movie's title and marketing blatantly implied that the characters would be facing off against either a fleet of zombies or a creature of some kind, hence the It. But ultimately, the film is focused more on paranoia in response to a contagion outbreak worldwide. Writer-director Trey Edward Schultz makes a concerted effort not to paint any of the film's characters as distinct heroes or villains. While typical human emotions such as fear, grief, anxiety, and fatal distrust are the catalysts which eventually condemn everyone in the movie to a grim fate. Now, some chose to view this as a cop-out, while others relished a rare post-apocalyptic movie that ditched zombies and beasts for good old-fashioned human nature. Number 2, The Blair Witch Project. A decade before Paranormal Activity reminded everyone how efficient and effective the invisible unknown could be, The Blair Witch Project made a lo-fi masterwork that changed the horror genre forevermore. With a mere $60,000 budget, 3 unknown actors, and a skeleton crew working overtime to scare the bejesus out of them in the woods, The Blair Witch Project delivered an expertly crafted slow burn, combining intriguingly creepy lore with believably terrified performances to sell the presence of the titular never-seen entity. The film's brilliance is capped by its bone-chilling ending, which implies the presence of the Blair Witch without showing a single frame of it, focused instead on poor Mike standing in the corner while Heather screams in terror. Sadly, the 2016 sequel, Blair Witch, made the mistake of revealing what the creature looked like via atrociously unimaginative CGI nonsense. Just look at it. But the original film took full advantage of its low resources to let the atmosphere do all the talking. Number 1, Hereditary. And finally, we have Ari Aster's horror masterpiece, Hereditary, which depicts the efforts of a coven to resurrect the demon king Paimon within the body of a suitable male host, in this case bereaved high schooler Peter Graham. While Paimon does technically take 2 forms throughout the movie, initially Peter's sister Charlie and then Peter at the very end of the film, these are possessions that disguise Paimon's true, pure form. More to the point, Paimon isn't a shapeshifter like the entity from It Follows, nor does he take on grotesque mutations like the Thing. There is literally no hint of what Paimon looks like beyond a drawing in a book about demons. Throughout the entirety of Hereditary, Paimon hides himself in plain sight under the guise of Charlie and finally Peter. But by requiring a human host to exist on Earth, his true visage remains an intoxicatingly creepy mystery. Now, we're never quite sure how aggressively Paimon possessed Charlie prior to her, accident, and therefore how much of pre-accident Charlie truly was Paimon, only makes re-watching the movie that much more unsettling. And now you'll want to do it all over again. Or not, I mean, it is horrifying.